Hi, this is Sniz with Bloodbane, World 11, Lord of Ultima. I know it's been quite some time since I've done any videos. I'd gotten pretty busy in real life and was kind of struggling with getting some empire management stuff in the time I had. I'm up to, I don't know, 180, 190 cities now, and it takes a pretty good chunk of my time, free time, to just keep my empire going. But coming soon, I'm going to do some videos on some empire management techniques, because I've actually gotten a pretty good handle on how to do that without it taking too much time. Anyway, kind of overdue to do some videos, and we're certainly moving into a PvP stage for many of us anyway. As I've covered in past videos, I strongly recommend, before even thinking about castling, PvP, anything, the very first thing you should do is build a very solid foundation of resource cities. That begins, I'd say in the at least 12 to 15 range, if not 20. Once you get some good resource cities built, a good solid foundation, constant steady stream, you're able to continue moonstone production while you build up a military. Great. I'll be covering some stuff about how to build a military, but if you're not to that stage yet, if you're not up to that 12 to 15 or even 20 city level, I strongly recommend just sticking with building good resource cities and getting ready for war. For those that are, we've been focusing on kind of dominating our own couple of continents, and we're getting ready to start moving into some new territories. We've been focused on landlocked local control. We're starting to shift into some naval stuff. So I figured it's a good time to maybe just do some general knowledge stuff about units and some basic techniques. So, and then I may end up doing some more on specific to Navy. But anyway, what I did is I went ahead and put a spreadsheet together covering the different unit types. I'm seeing a lot of people attacking with the defensive units, or at least not good offensive units. So I figured I'd go ahead and do a comparison of all the units. Now, that doesn't mean that many of these on the top of this list are useless. It just means that in assessing how their value for attacking, for offense, this is how they compare. So many of these units have other uses, but this just assesses their offensive value. Now, when you look at the tooltip, I am 98% sure I have a clear understanding of how these mechanics work. But you have an attack value. This is the value that will be used when you attack, period. So whatever your unit is, the only thing that is really determines how many other units it kills is your attack value compared to their possible bonuses from walls and towers and so on. So your attack value is what matters when attacking. Now, your defensive values have nothing to do with your troops' survival when you're on the offense. So a lot of people, I think that those defensive values when you're attacking a castle have some impact on how many troops you do or don't lose. Your defensive values are the damage you do, or the attacks, the return attacks that you do when you're the defender. So those defensive values that you see listed on your tooltip only apply when you are being sieged, plundered, assaulted, or whatever. Just take those completely out of the equation when you are sieging, plundering, assaulting. Just ignore those defensive values. The only thing that really matters is your attack value, and then whatever modifiers they have based on level discrepancy and nighttime protection and morale and walls and all the other factors. So, in assessing each unit, focusing only on that attack value, so this is in the context of using these units to attack castles and plunder and whatnot, this is just, the spreadsheet's basically just an equalizing process. So in this column, we're listing the attack value of the unit, and then these two columns are comparing it in terms of what does it cost to make it. So it's saying how is in terms of the cost that it costs to build and or replace it, how does its attack value compare to that as an offensive unit? This factors in food. How much attack is it doing for the food that it consumes to get a relative comparative value? And the third area is for the space required, because some units require 1 head, 2 heads, 10 heads. So when you're using a unit that requires 2 heads, it actually is taking 2 slots in terms of your total barracks and how many units you can have from that castle. So this is a comparison for how much damage they do per head they consume. for per slot they consume. And then this last area is just the detail. Now, for the purposes of this comparison, in terms of the unit costs, I'm just totaling how much the total resources are. Yes, comparatively, gold may be more valuable than this, or iron may be less valuable than wood, or vice versa. In terms of playing the market, that's true. There's some value in that. And so in terms of assessing each individual, there may be some value in saying that something that costs iron versus gold is a little easier to come by, a little cheaper. But in terms of just a total cost, I mean, assuming the majority of your resources comes from what you produce, and you have control of what you produce, and you can control what you produce based on what you're going to use. So in terms of assessing the cost of a unit, I'm just consolidating those into one number. So regardless of the fact, for example, a crossbowman is 150 wood and 200 gold, I'm valuing that as a cost of 350. So you can use the right column to kind of get a little bit of context, but anyway. So what this shows, in these units, everything in this area, I consider a defensive unit. And the reason for that are these values here. A Guardian, it's how much damage they do per cost. These are extremely low. They're under 0.2. Or under a 1-to-5 ratio, where also even on space required, the damage that they do per space required is relatively low. The upside of defensive units, and one of the reasons they're great for defense, is the food consumption is typically pretty low, which in this case low is, or actually no, the high is good. That's the damage it does per food consumed. So they're pretty low across the board. But that is assessing only their attack value. Again, that's in the context of using any one of these units in this area as an offensive unit. I see a lot of people using ballistas, paladins, which paladins were pretty good for raiding because of their loot capacity compared to their slots taken. But in terms of anything past raiding, paladins get super expensive. And they really are not very valuable units, so I have them in the defensive category. Now, I'll be covering defensive units in a different video, but my opinion is that the Ranger is a really good defensive unit because its defensive values, when you see me compare those later, will hold up pretty good, especially compared to a Guardian. And the key is that a Ranger's offensive value is much more powerful than a Guardian. So a Ranger as a defensive unit is almost as good as a Guardian. You'll see in that comparison, where their offensive value is much higher, which does two things. First of all, in a pinch, it provides a decent offensive force, something that is almost up to that 0.19 level. And more important to me is when your defensive troops are hanging around with nothing to do, you got your stagnant defenses, they can be raiding. And so that attack value makes them a solid raiding force, and that's why I strongly favor Rangers over Guardians. But I'm not covering defenses right now. This one looks like it's going to be a two-part, but let me get into the meat of this one. These three units I would consider the proper ground offensive force. Now this is unit to unit. This is what kills other units. Obviously, katas and rams and galleons have their value in terms of taking down buildings, and they also kill units. But in terms of just what's going to kill the unit, that opening assault, how you clear out their defensive units, Warlocks, Zerks, and Mages are pretty much hands down the three to go with. As far as which to use, in terms of, and this is all relative to what you're trying to do, the Mage obviously is the best. The Mage is a 0.35 for damage done to its total cost. It's fairly fast build time compared to a Warlock anyway. It's highest damage per slot, and it's actually the highest damage for food. So in terms of a assaulting force, the Mage is the most efficient unit in the game. I am going to actually pause here and do a part 2. So this is end of part 1 of offensive unit assessment.